In this video, we'll talk about discourse analysis. And in my experience, many students find discourse analysis difficult to understand. I think it's because discourse analysis is quite a theoretical and philosophical approach to analyzing text, or at least it has a theoretical and philosophical base that can be difficult to understand. I have been using discourse analysis myself, both in my master thesis and in my PhD work and later. And I still find it difficult to explain in simple terms what discourse analysis is. I will make an attempt in this video, and then we'll see at the end how successful it was. Let's start by defining what we mean by discourse. And there's a lot of different ways of defining discourse. A simple definition is that discourse is a way of talking about the world or an aspect of the world. This definition from a book by Dunn and Neumann is a bit more complicated, where they define discourse as systems of meaning production that fix meaning, however temporarily, and enable us to make sense of the world and to act within it. And I think one key word in this definition is the word meaning production. So discourse analysis is about analyzing how meaning is created or communicated or produced in a systematic way. So discourses are about patterns or systems of meaning production. And meaning is fixed temporarily. That means that what something means can change, but there's a certain stability here, a certain temporary fixing of meaning. And that enables us to make sense of the world and to act within it. A different definition from Bucky is that discourse analysis involves analyzing the ways in which meaning is created through particular language uses. And I think this definition of discourse analysis, it really brings forth the fact that in discourse analysis, the role of language is central. And this is one way that discourse analysis is distinguished from other approaches to textual analysis. And the way one looks at or understands language in discourse analysis is a bit particular, because after what is often called the linguistic turn in the social sciences and humanities, researchers started to look at the relationship between language and reality in a new way. It used to be, very simply explained, that researchers would look at language simply as something that was used to reflect a reality that was out there. We used words just to reflect things out there that we could see and feel and touch and observe, and that language was our way to put into words what we observed and then communicate it to others. After the linguistic turns, researchers started asking more critical questions about this reflective view of language, saying instead that language does not simply reflect a reality that is out there, but in a way language also plays a role in creating or constructing this reality. Because based on the words we use, the concepts at our disposal, how we understand the reality that we observe and that we analyze and research as researchers or observe as normal citizens change. So that language does not mirror reality, language creates and categorizes reality in specific ways. And reality, the physical reality out there, the social reality out there, will always exist regardless of whether we talk about it or not, regardless of how we use language to make sense of this reality. But our only way to understand and add meaning to this reality is through language. So that language becomes something that kind of lies between us and the world out there. We cannot refer to the world as it is. Our observations will always be colored by the concepts we are using. That's the kind of philosophical, epistemological base of discourse analysis. And because of this view of language, language becomes a key focus in discourse analysis. Let me exemplify a bit more what I mean by discourse. And I will be using several examples. We can, for instance, talk about different discourses or different understandings or ways of defining who the people are. This picture here in the upper left corner is from a Pegida demonstration in Germany. Pegida is an anti-Muslim political movement, and here it says "Wir sind das Volk," we are the people. And we can see today in Europe and in other parts of the world that different groups and politicians are trying to define who the people are in different ways. And we can talk about those different ways of defining who the people are as different discourses. We can also talk about different discourses on love, illustrated by the picture here in the upper right corner. For instance, distinguishing between an understanding of love based on, feelings and falling in love and choosing your own partner. Whereas an opposite understanding would be more what we find in arranged marriages, where the feelings and the love and the heart beating is not necessarily the most important part of marriage. If we think about it in terms of two understandings or discourses on marriage. We can talk about discourses on national identity, illustrated in the bottom left picture by a woman wearing a flag as a hijab. Different discourses on what constitutes Norwegianness or Norwegian national identity. What does it mean to be Norwegian? We can talk about different discourses on childhood. What does it mean to be a child? How are children different from adults? Does being a child mean that you should play and learn? Should you work? Should you start school when you're young? Should kindergarten be more play-based or more learning-based? And we can talk about different discourses on religion. Discourses that might try to define what counts as religion. Where do we draw the boundary between what is religion and what is kind of outside of religion? Or we can talk about different discourses on specific religions, such as, for instance, Islam, which we find in Europe today, that there's different discourses that try to define Islam and the relationship between Islam and the Western world in different ways. And these discourses that we analyze using discourse analysis, they can be found in different kinds of texts. As we talked about in another video, in textual analysis, the texts that we analyze, they can be images, they can be speeches from politicians, they can be newspaper articles, TV shows, etc., etc. And all these various forms of text are full of discourses. In addition to the importance placed on the role of language in discourse analysis are also very much concerned with the role of power. And this quote by Tyra kind of highlights the role that power plays in discourse analysis, where Tyra states that discourses establish one version of the world in the face of competing versions. That's discourses, highlight certain aspects of the world, what is said, leave something else unsaid. Therefore, discourses are organized around practices of exclusion. So when we, for instance, include something in a particular discourse on what constitutes Norwegian national identity, we also leave out other things that could be included in this discourse. But then we can also see that there are different discourses that exist at the same time. There are competing versions, in the words of Tyra. That one discourse on Norwegian national identity might emphasize skin color or origins, that you're born and bred and that your grandparents and great-grandparents all were born and bred in Norway. A different discourse might emphasize more cultural practices, that you eat brown cheese and like to go skiing in the winter. Maybe another discourse would emphasize other aspects of Norwegian national identity. And that these different discourses, They can exist simultaneously. They can offer competing versions of what it means to be Norwegian, and that they can also be kind of in a struggle with each other to be the one discourse defining what it means to be Norwegian. So we can talk about discursive struggles, about a fight or a struggle between different discourses when it comes to being the one discourse that defines the phenomenon that we're interested in analyzing. For instance, Norwegian national identity. I said that there are different texts that you can use in this discourse analysis, and there's also possible to focus the analysis in different ways. And there are also, to complicate matters further, different approaches to discourse analysis, and I will not go into those different approaches in this video. But I have some suggestions for books that you can read that if you want to learn more about this. But a discourse analysis can be done in different ways. You can focus on kind of identifying the discourses that are found within a corpus or a selection of text, looking for like which discourses exist. Is there one discourse on this topic that defines the phenomenon that you're interested in, whether it's marriage or childhood or who are the people or Norwegian national identity? Or do you find different discourses that defines the phenomenon in different ways? Secondly, you can focus on identifying the linguistic or rhetorical devices that are used to construct these discourses, to look more into the language aspect of how meaning is created. That could be to look for what kind of words are used to describe, for instance, Norwegian national identity, what kind of binaries are used, which categories, looking for metaphors, looking for how certain words are linked together into chains of meaning, etc., etc. And here, various approaches to discourse analysis will offer various tools or give you ideas for how to do this kind of analysis. Thirdly, you can focus the analysis more on the text's social and political effects. What does the text do? And this is also where power is really brought into the analysis, because you can be interested in how text offer various discourses that construct identities, whether national identity or group-based identities. Discourses can be used to legitimize certain actors or certain actions. Discourses can offer an alternative interpretation of a phenomenon that maybe is understood in one particular way in society, and then the texts that you analyze offer an alternative understanding that kind of contest the dominant discourses. And then you would be looking more at this, what I call the social and political effects of the text that you analyze. And it's possible to do one of these three things in a particular discourse analysis, or to combine these different focuses in the same study, depending on what kind of text you analyze, your research question, and what you're interested in doing. So I hope this gave you a taste or a better understanding of what discourse analysis is. And to really understand discourse analysis, I think you need to read up more on textbooks explaining what discourse analysis is, and to also read some examples of studies based on discourse analysis. And I will offer you some advice or some tips for places to read in our Canvas room. Good luck understanding what discourse analysis is.